A single misstep can illuminate a multitude of previously unknown details. To illustrate, my wife's infidelity with her superior was discovered in a rather unconventional manner. I was taken to the police station on suspicion of a grave offense. This challenging, yet enlightening period in my life proved to be a pivotal point of transformation. It is unlikely that Tony Catalano's experiences would have been identical. Mr. B had recognized his commitment by assigning him increasingly important tasks over the years. Now faced with his most significant assignment yet, Big Tony was determined to validate Mr. B's trust in him. He studied the photograph of his target once more and took it as worth noting that the black Cadillac Escalade was situated in the poorly lit parking garage. Tony was aware that Arthur Clark owed the boss a substantial sum for assistance rendered in a business transaction. His mission was to remind Clark, the CEO of a prominent insurance company, of the repercussions of his late payment. He hoped to convey a sense of urgency and authority, akin to the Big Tony growl, if necessary. It was necessary to imply physical harm but refrain from any violent actions. These corporate types are typically weak and in need. It was likely that he would resort to pleading once confronted. It was imperative that he contact me first thing tomorrow to address his delayed payment. Mr. B had instructed Tony to conduct some research on Arthur Clark. He was aware that Clark was the man in question was a physically attractive individual who appeared to take care of himself. He had wavy brown hair and deep brown eyes. Clark drove a 2022 Escalade and typically lingered as the last executive in the building, implying that they would be alone in the parking garage. The second-to-last executive had departed just 10 minutes earlier. Tony observed Clark from behind a column support as the garage door opened. He was impressed by Clark's appearance. The man appeared to be approximately a decade younger than his photograph. Tony, who is 6 feet 4 inches and weighs 255 pounds, approached. As the other man approached, Mr. B became visibly displeased. He informed Tony that the payment was overdue. Tony responded with a snarl, demanding to know who he was. The man, taken aback, stammered that he did not know anyone named Mr. B. Tony responded with a growl, withdrawing a pistol. From his waistband, the assailant attempted to gain possession of the firearm. However, Tony, perspiring profusely, was able to maintain his grip on the weapon. In a moment of panic, Tony accidentally discharged the weapon while readjusting his hold. The resulting gunshot reverberated within the confines of the garage. Loudly within the confines of the garage, Tony experienced a profound sense of horror when he observed the red liquid gushing out of the man amidst the screams. This caused him to lose consciousness. Despite Tony's continued survival, he doubted the man's chances of survival as the blood continued to flow. This unforeseen event was not part of Tony's plans, and his ability to think quickly was not a strength. With no apparent escape route, Tony, under immense pressure, recalled a line from a pirate movie, "Dead Men Tell No Tales." Given the circumstances, it seemed appropriate. Tony anticipated Mr. B's displeasure at this mistake was evident. He was unaware of the discrepancy in car models, failing to notice the difference in the Escalade year. He exited the garage, while Gary was engaged in a phone conversation. The phone rang repeatedly, and after 10 minutes, it rang again. It was a Friday, and Dr. Alan Siegel and Dr. Victor Washington, two individuals who identified themselves as police officers, approached the receptionist. They inquired about Dr. Washington. 10 minutes later, Dr. Washington, who was confused and flushed, was escorted out in handcuffs. Victor Washington consented to an interview only after his attorney arrived at the police station. As previously mentioned, I had minimal acquaintance with Gary Finchel. He was employed at the same company as my wife. I encountered him occasionally at her workplace, including gatherings such as Christmas parties and 4th of July barbecues. I doubt I exchanged more than 100 words with a man since Tracy started working there 4 years ago. Victor stated sharply, "What is happening?" He added, "Are you aware that Mr. Finchel was murdered the other night?" Male officer, "Yes." Tracy seemed quite distressed when she learned about it yesterday. "I believe she left work early. She might be at home again today." Victor replied, and the two officers exchanged glances, sharing a smile. Victor and his attorney noted the exchange. "Where is this leading?" inquired Victor's attorney. "A man loses his life, and you don't expect us to overlook his lover's betrayal. Do you? Remarked the female officer. Victor Washington was on the verge of falling out of his chair. What? He exclaimed. Betrayal. My wife. Another man. You're saying you had no idea your wife was cheating. With Jerry Finchel, you did not take revenge, and I am not the Easter Bunny, and she is not the Tooth Fairy, the male officer remarked. You have already confessed to lacking an alibi for the time of the murder, and you clearly had a motive. Victor slouched in his seat, his lawyer murmuring in his ear, no. Frankly, I was previously unaware of the circumstances surrounding this case. I must confess that I am at a loss as to how you came to be informed of the details of this investigation. I am curious as to how you discovered the truth about my wife's affair with Mr. Finchel. Dr. Washington, we are aware of the situation. How did you come to learn of the details of this case? Affair with fiancé, the dentist inquired once more. Your wife left 2 messages on his cellular device regarding a meeting with him around the time of the crime. She confessed when we pressed her. The officer explained that Victor was afforded ample time to contemplate his situation while in police custody. The police had not yet charged him, but they had 48 hours before they were obliged to release him. Despite being a clever man, Victor found himself more preoccupied with the news of his wife's infidelity than with the looming possibility of being charged with murder. He and Tracy had shared a 26-year-long marriage and had raised 2 adult children together up until just a few hours ago. Despite a year-long marriage and the raising of 2 adult children together, Victor had believed their bond to be unbreakable. However, he was now consumed by questions regarding the nature of the affair, its duration, the initial catalyst, and the reasons behind his failure to recognize the signs on Sunday evening. Victor was formally accused of murder and deemed a flight risk, resulting in the denial of bail. He was compelled to observe that his wife had not attempted to contact him since his arrest. Had she, too, suspected him of killing her lover? Victor reflected on Wednesday evening for nearly a year. It had become a routine for Tracy to go out for dinner and chat with her close friend, Laure. Victor had never questioned it much before. He trusted his wife when she returned home around 8, however, she seemed unusually tense and did not hesitate to express it. There were no dishes in the sink. She inquired as to whether he had eaten tarts for dinner again. She expressed her frustration at his apparent inability to cook. He replied that he was perfectly capable of cooking. She retorted that she simply did not feel like cooking when she was alone. She expressed her desire for him to be present with her. She also expressed her displeasure at the girls' night out. Tracy's frustration with her husband intensified as her relationship with Gary Finchel continued, though Victor only recently became aware of the issue in their marriage. Tracy was profoundly devoted to her husband and had not sought an affair when her friendship with her boss, Gary Finchel, began to deepen over the years of working closely together. Finchel began to perceive potential for more as she confided in him about her personal life. Tracy, who is 5 feet 5 inches and weighs 120 pounds with a curvy figure and shoulder length, straight black hair, appeared much younger than her 48 years. However, she became increasingly anxious about approaching her 50th birthday. She gradually boosted her confidence with compliments, despite her husband also praising her. Nevertheless, Tracy seemed particularly gratified by the attention from another man, Finch, who was married and had 2 children of his own. He courted Tracy's affection with careful patience. It took him almost a year before he slept with another man's woman. Despite her smaller stature compared to her husband, Tracy found Finch a more skilled lover. She ignored the novelty factors that added to her pleasure. The illicit nature of the affair strengthened their bond. Attention from another man. Finch, who was married and had 2 children of his own, courted Tracy's affection with careful patience. It took him almost a year before he initiated sexual intercourse with her, despite her smaller stature compared to her husband. Tracy found Finchel a more skilled lover. She ignored the novelty factors that added to her pleasure. The illicit nature of the affair strengthened their bond. Tracy and her lover typically convened for clandestine meetings, occurring once or twice a week. They also frequently met for lunch and spent considerable time together in the office. Their affair was shrouded in secrecy, even from Arthur C. Clarke. Victor had his lawyer handle the financial investigation on Monday morning, due to his diminishing trust in his wife. That same morning, his children visited him while he was in custody. He was also informed about the sensationalized coverage in the tabloid regarding his predicament. One of the headlines posted by his son Jared referred to the deceased masculinity in a crude manner. Victor remarked that the headline writer was clever, but he also stated that it was not funny and that his father was in serious trouble. I am confident that this situation will eventually resolve itself. I did not commit the crime, and I am certain of my innocence. However, it is evident that the mother in question does not share this view. She has made it clear that she does not believe me to be capable of handling her new partner, whom she views as superior and a more suitable lover. I eventually intervened and asked her to stop making unfounded accusations. My son Jared then proceeded to provide further details of the conversation. He informed me that he had eventually told his mother to stop talking nonsense. He displayed a sheepish grin at his father, as was typical. He understood that Victor would not condone his son using harsh language towards his wife. However, this was far from typical. Victor returned the grin, prompting Jared to breathe a sigh of relief. He expressed gratitude for Victor's support. His daughter inquired about the timing of his awareness of her mother's infidelity. He replied that he had not known until after their arrest. He had consistently informed the authorities that he was unaware of her actions. Victor replied, "I cared about your mother, but I would not end up in jail simply because she engaged in promiscuous behavior. I would like to know who eliminated that individual, however, or would be willing to shake their hand." The children exchanged looks of utter surprise. They had always known their father to be truthful with them. Similarly, they had never known their mother to be deceitful with them either, but it was undeniable now that she had been. She attempted to justify her infidelity by consistently blaming their father for Phil's murder. She repeatedly insisted to anyone who would listen that the media was unfairly targeting her for a minor indiscretion while giving her husband a pass for the murder. She stated, "I had an affair, but your father took a man's life. The press only cares about the sexual aspect." She expressed her regret to her children, stating that if her husband had committed murder, it was only because she had engaged in a sexual relationship with another man. Jared responded, indicating that the state authorities became immediately suspicious upon discovering a 9mm pistol alongside the decomposed remains of a large man in a rural area several months later. 2 days later, ballistics analysis on the firearm revealed a connection to a high-profile case from the previous spring, famously known as the jilted husband case, is an example of an incident where a betrayed husband resorts to violence against his wife's lover. Such incidents were uncommon. The deceased was identified as Tony Big Tony Catalano, a minor member of the mafia associated with the George B.S. organization. Despite a thorough investigation by both state and local law enforcement, no apparent link could be established between Catalano and the individual imprisoned for the murder of Gary Finchel. The individual imprisoned for the murder of Gary Finchel, Dr. Victor Washington, could be established as the resurgence of interest in the jilted husband case reignited media attention, prompting collaboration between journalists and law enforcement to uncover any connection between the mafia and the insurance company. Eventually, the police succeeded in identifying Arthur Clark as the missing link. A vigilant video technician at a local news station was able to piece together the entire puzzle. Robert Comto from KRNT News was examining photos of the key figures in both cases when he noticed a striking physical resemblance between Gary Finchel and his boss Clark. It occurred to him that both men drove black Escalades, although Finchel was 2 years older. This prompted the hypothesis that Big Tony might have mistakenly shot Finchel thinking he was Clark. Was he targeting Clark? This hypothesis was proposed during an unofficial meeting between the two investigating officers. Could it be that Fell was losing his manhood, just an odd coincidence? Further inquiry prompted the police to consider the video technician's hypothesis. Several employees from the insurance company pointed out that Phil's meticulous grooming and car preference seemed like obvious attempts to curry favor with his superior, George Buell, was displeased with Big Tony when he reported that his assignment had gone awry, resulting in Clark's demise that night. The mafia boss often struggled to control his notoriously bad temper, but in his line of work, it wasn't always feasible. He explicitly instructed Tony not to shoot, yet the man proceeded to do so. "I have killed him twice. I have made a significant error in judgment, Mr. B. I am truly remorseful. I will provide you with a place to stay for a few days until we can arrange for you to leave town for a while. He will ensure your safety and provide for your basic needs. Thank you, Mr. B. I am grateful for your assistance. I am truly sorry about what happened. Clark had departed from the office earlier that day for a medical appointment. This turn of events might be perceived as a positive outcome by the Bureau, as it would demonstrate to Mr. Clark that they are not to be underestimated. However, I must admit that I have always held a certain affection for Tony. He was a lovable and naive individual. I must ensure that everything is in order. Donna, please inform me of the necessary arrangements. With a nod, she departed. Following the death of her husband, Tracy's life took a turn for the worse. Unaware that her husband had knowledge of her affair, she was taken aback by his violent act against another man. She was suddenly overcome with fear and found solace in the fact that the police had apprehended him and he was being detained without bail. Despite her children's distress over her affair, Tracy attempted to shift the focus of attention away from her. Infidelity was emphasized by Tracy in order to deflect attention from her own actions. However, this tactic was undermined by the media, who sensationalized the story of a betrayed husband taking lethal action. Tracy complained to her colleague Liz during a lunch break approximately 2 weeks after the incident. The press has made me practically synonymous with infidelity. It is not a common occurrence for a jealous husband to shoot his lover and kill him. Liz commented with a nervous laugh, noting Tracy's expression. She quickly apologized, saying, "I'm sorry." It was common knowledge that Tracy and Gary were romantically involved. However, the depth of their feelings for each other was unclear. Did they love each other? Did they have romantic feelings for each other? Liz asked, "Were you two in love?" Tracy replied, "I cared for Vic, but Gary and I were." The development of a more serious relationship is regrettable, as it will never be known how it might have progressed. It is difficult to imagine that Victor would have resorted to murder. It is often said that one cannot truly know another person. Tracy observed that this was true. Liz replied softly, noting that she had been present with Tracy and a few other colleagues at Gary's funeral the previous week. She had observed Gary's wife casting hostile looks towards Tracy on multiple occasions. Tracy's gaze remained low throughout the service, though tears were evident. Liz sensed Tracy's apprehension about Gary's widow potentially causing a scene. Thankfully, such an occurrence did not take place. Tracy made a point of staying in the background, avoiding any confrontation with the widow, having never experienced incarceration before. Victor was overwhelmed by the sensation of freedom upon being released. After spending over 4 months in jail, Victor experienced a profound sense of relief and elation upon his release. He remarked, "Wow, the air feels so much fresher. I can't believe it." Victor was accompanied by his attorney as he exited the jail. The city's district attorney had dropped the charges against Victor after the police discovered that another man, Big Tony Catalano, was responsible for the murder of Gary Finchel. Lance Weatherman, Victor's wife's lover, drove Victor to the home he had shared with his wife, Tracy, for the past 15 years. Tracy was still at work, it was just past noon. Stepping into the house, Victor observed that everything looked exactly as he remembered it. Lance observed Victor slowly exploring the entire house, running his hands over the walls, furniture, and knickknacks as if he were blind. "I've missed this place so much, even with everything that's happened," Victor murmured. Victor approached his well-stocked liquor cabinet, aware that Tracy abstained from hard alcohol. It was likely untouched since his arrest. The cabinet boasted at least 25 bottles of various spirits. "A moment for celebration demands a single malt," Victor declared, retrieving a partially filled bottle of Glenmorangie 12-year-old. "A year has elapsed." Victor then proceeded to pour shots for himself and Lance, expressing his gratitude for their support and solidarity during the most challenging periods. He noted that the gesture held greater significance than a mere financial compensation. Both men sipped their shots in contemplative silence, with Lance tapping his fingers on the manila folder resting on the table. Victor then inquired about the reasons behind Tracy's decision not to divorce him while he was incarcerated. He suggested that the complexity of the situation, particularly the media frenzy surrounding it, might have played a role in her decision. Subsequently, she may have presumed that you would address the matter from prison. Lance postulated that the children had conveyed that she was convinced I had murdered her lover and harbored resentment, so it is unexpected that she has not initiated it yet. Victor reflected that she will be in for a considerable shock when she returns. Perhaps amidst all this, she has had a change of heart and wants to reconcile. Gary is no longer here, the children are angry with her, and she has become a living embodiment of the Cruella de Vil lifestyle. What is the idiomatic expression that best encapsulates this situation? Lance proposed that, upon returning home, Tracy acknowledged the presence of an unfamiliar vehicle in her driveway. Initially, she mistook it for that of another reporter seeking an interview. However, she soon realized that the vehicle's occupant had already gained access to her residence. In response, she promptly contacted the Emergency Services Dispatch Center, providing them with the necessary details. In a matter of moments, 2 uniformed police officers entered the Washington residence, accompanied by Tracy. "What are you doing here?" she exclaimed upon seeing Victor as the officers brandished their weapons. Both Victor and Lance raised their hands in surrender. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. I live here. I'm Vic Washington. I was just released from jail a few hours ago. I even got the DA to apologize to me," Victor explained. "True," Lance interjected. His attorney confirmed that all charges against Lance had been dropped. One of the police officers was dispatched to verify the statement, leaving Tracy visibly shocked. She was taken aback by the realization that she was merely a pawn in a tragic series of events. Tracy and Victor exchanged glances, and Victor commented, "I happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time." He then inquired, "Why would I ever?" "You are risking jail time for someone like her. You are overestimating your significance." Tracy's face flushed with embarrassment as she lowered her head. The 2 officers were preparing to depart. Lance requested their presence to witness something, handing Tracy a manila envelope. He informed her that she had been served. "I am uncertain about the prospect of a divorce," Tracy murmured. "I had previously believed you were responsible for Gary's death, but given that you were not, there may still be a possibility of reconciliation. However, your actions have made that unlikely. You have betrayed me, and I am not willing to forget that your infidelity resulted in my imprisonment." For over 4 months, Victor verbally expressed his admiration for Alan Siegel, claiming that he was a superior individual in various respects. This included asserting that Siegel was a more admirable person and a more satisfying romantic partner. Victor was uncertain about how he could adequately express his gratitude to Siegel, who was not only his business partner but also the spouse of Alan, a man who had been instrumental in supporting him throughout the ordeal. Marilyn provided unwavering support throughout his wrongful imprisonment and divorce. The Siegels made regular visits to Victor in jail, ensuring he wasn't alone. Alan went above and beyond, working 50 to 60-hour weeks to manage Victor's workload in his absence. After taking upon returning to work, Victor was astonished by the kindness and support he received from people around him. Many went out of their way to offer words of encouragement, and some even took the initiative to share their contact information with him on slips of paper. Despite feeling embarrassed, Victor accepted these gestures, not wanting to offend anyone. He then realized the profound impact of the press and social media, as his children, Alan and Marilyn, all highlighted how sympathetic portrayals in the media contrasted sharply with a negative light cast upon his ex-wife. His wife, Tracy, and her partner, Gary, were seated at an upscale restaurant. Marilyn Siegel extended her hand in a gesture of concern. "What's happening, Vic? It has been 2 years, and your mind seems focused, but your heart isn't in it," she said. Victor met Marilyn's gaze and recognized her and Alan as his pillars of support in recent years. Alongside his daughter, Dee, Marilyn had taken a personal interest in Victor's well-being. Frequently observing him with unwavering patience, she awaited his response, prompting him to reconsider any flippant replies. He acknowledged that things were not the same anymore, and that he was able to engage with women and even have physical relationships. However, he also recognized that there was a void, and that there was no real connection. It is possible for sex to exist without love, but this is not what he is seeking. Vic acknowledged that it is not possible to form a connection on the first, second, or third date. He was reminded of how he felt for Tracy and how it took time for them to get to know each other. It was not possible for love to develop overnight. He was accused of rushing things. The expectation of a spontaneous and miraculous appearance of a romantic partner is a common one. However, the reality is that it is not a viable approach. Marilyn reasoned that while she was willing to engage in a couple of dates with a potential partner, she was not willing to invest significant time in a relationship. She was 52 years old, not 22. The reality was that she did not have the luxury of time to pursue a romantic relationship. Marilyn interjected, emphasizing that the aging process does not accelerate the passage of time. She suggested that if a relationship was meant to be, it would happen naturally. Very well, but you must allow it an opportunity to develop. Marilyn articulated, her tone indicating mild exasperation. She then cast a sidelong glance at her friend, who was unaware that she was perhaps the only individual Victor would pay attention to by chance. Marilyn and Alan began hosting intimate gatherings at their residence every few for several months. Marilyn ensured that there were always multiple single women present, including Victor. Victor was not unaware of Marilyn's intentions and commented to Alan about Marilyn's discerning taste in women. He advised Alan to behave well, as if Marilyn ever terminated their relationship, she would have numerous potential partners to choose from. Victor observed that there were numerous attractive women in attendance. In response, Alan commented that he had noticed the woman in question, who was situated on the Seagull's spacious deck. Victor was immediately aware of her physical presence, noting her figure in the snug jeans and the expanse of her skin. The woman's smooth skin was revealed by her raised top as she turned around. He stood there silently, a faint smile playing on his lips, until he realized she was looking directly at him. He was unable to form coherent thoughts, and his mind was filled with embarrassment. The woman standing before him appeared to be no taller than 5 feet and weighing no more than 100 pounds. However, Victor observed that a significant portion of that weight seemed to be concentrated in her chest as her arms rested at her sides. He could discern about 3 inches of well-defined core muscles beneath her prominent breasts. She had well-defined core muscles beneath her prominent breasts. "I get that a lot," she asserted confidently. "Pardon." Vic's mind finally caught up with his ears as he glanced at the woman's face for the first time, realizing she was Asian. The woman had large eyes and straight black hair that fell to her shoulders. She noticed the recognition dawning on his face and interjected, "I'm joking. I'm just joking." The man protested, "You're not the first person to take a moment to realize I'm Asian." He added, "It usually takes a while for men to meet my gaze." The woman replied, "Perhaps," but her voice was louder than necessary. She drew the attention of several nearby people and gestured for him to lower his voice, causing him to blush deeply. "I'm Dr. Vic Washington," he said, extending his hand. "I've been AL's business partner for quite some time." "Yes, I recognized you from the news," the woman replied, noticing Vic's grimace. "You with my comment about the news? I suppose it's akin to people avoiding contact with me when they talk." She added, "That's a fair point." In response, Vic suggested, "How about we grab a drink? Then I'll converse with you while maintaining eye contact, and you can pretend I'm not a pitiful sad sack whose wife publicly embarrassed him." The woman found herself momentarily speechless, realizing that she might have been as overt as Vic when he was gazing at her ample cleavage. Sure," she said, giving him a shy smile for the next hour. Victor engaged in conversation with the woman until he realized he was monopolizing her attention. He apologized for any social awkwardness and expressed his intention to let her interact with other guests. She reassured him that they conversed for some time and then parted ways to interact with other guests. Throughout the remainder of the evening, Victor discreetly observed her, noting Alan's subsequent comment about the strain it would cause on his neck from constantly looking over his shoulder. Victor suggested swapping places so that he could have a clearer view without straining. Victor acknowledged his attempt at being subtle and cool, albeit unsuccessfully. Alan then provided some background information about Lainey, mentioning that she was 3 years younger than Victor, a longtime friend of Marlon's, and worked as a reference librarian. Her previous marriage of 20 years ended due to infidelity on her husband's part, leaving her single. In a subsequent conversation, Victor expressed surprise at how someone like Lainey could remain single for so long, questioning if she had overly high standards. Alan explained that while Lainey was highly regarded by their friend Marilyn, she was also selective about potential partners and was not inclined to rush into another marriage unless it was with the right person. Alan's explanation was met with a thoughtful acknowledgement from Victor. The two did not reconnect for the remainder of the evening, and Lainey departed without Victor obtaining her contact information. However, he was not concerned as he was aware that Marilyn had it. Victor waited 2 days before contacting Marilyn, as he did not feel the need to justify his reasons for doing so. Marilyn, remarking instead of starting with the usual niceties, inquired as to whether Vic was merely attempting to appear sophisticated. She was somewhat surprised that he had refrained from using profanity, as Marilyn seldom cursed and hardly ever dropped the F-bomb. She proceeded to explain that she had been attempting to appear cool and not desperate. Victor then inquired as to why he had stressed the importance of appearing cool when he had already ruined that with a simple the word letter may have been uttered, or perhaps it was the drooling. Victor was relieved that Marilyn could not see how much he was blushing. He was then asked whether he would dial her number immediately or spend 2 days pondering the appropriate approach. Marilyn had equipped him with the skills of a master debater. It was known that Marilyn always chuckled, and was therefore a jokester. March. Vic replied, "Can you provide me with her contact information?" "Of course, but I must remind you of my previous advice regarding the importance of fostering a relationship, rather than merely expecting it to materialize spontaneously. Ian's restaurant for dinner and allowed her to pick the movie. Is this an attempt to impress me with this restaurant?" Lainey inquired. "Did Marilyn mention that I have Italian heritage?" "No, I was not aware." Victor replied. "I simply did not want to take an Asian woman to a Chinese, Japanese, or Korean restaurant. Well, I am mostly Chinese, but it is from my other ancestry that I inherited these," she remarked, adjusting her posture to emphasize her chest. Her posture emphasized her chest. When one thinks of Chinese women, one probably envisions a gymnast. Double D is not the typical stereotype. Victor blushed, uncertain why exactly he was accustomed to a woman with prominent assets speaking so openly about them. When he glanced back up, she was gazing directly at him with a smile. "If I come off as too direct, I apologize." Marilyn did not inform Victor that she had invited several single women to the gathering. However, she did not tell him about them. Victor admitted that he needed to make an effort to interact with the women at the gathering. Lainey began to laugh loudly. Victor soon learned that Lainey had no qualms about letting out a hearty laugh when she was amused. Lainey was supportive of Victor. Lainey did not shy away from displaying emotional distress when the moment struck. This was evidenced by her emotional reaction to the ending of the romantic movie she chose. It was subsequently revealed that her father's passing, much like the father of the female lead in the film, was the reason behind her tears. Victor was not aware of this until Lainey shared the information during a late-night dessert. After waiting for 2 days, Victor called Lainey to arrange another date, which she eagerly accepted for the upcoming weekend. Their 5th date culminated in both of them ending up in Victor's bed about a month later. Marilyn had lunch with Lainey, and it did not take long for her to inquire about the progress of Lainey's relationship with Victor. Marilyn was curious about the nature of the relationship between Victor and Lainey's previous partner. The wife allowed him to depart, citing his attractive and Lainey observed that he was a gentleman and much more. She noted that he maintained contact with her, with the exception of periods when she wore the red silk dress. She expressed her astonishment that any man would not spend the entire night admiring her cleavage in that dress. The other women present laughed, realizing that Dr. Victor Washington might as well have claimed to be a married man at that point. In reality, it would be another 6 months before their wedding took place. Dr. Victor Washington's wedding announcement was given only a cursory mention in the local newspaper, not the extensive coverage that was afforded to it on a nationwide scale. The media was eager to delve into the salacious details of the marriage of the jilted husband, Dan, and George Bull exclaimed to Arthur Clarke over the phone, hurling a newspaper across the room. Each time one of them performs an action, there is an additional article about the jilted husband. The press then begins to investigate once more. Clarke replied, uncertain of the direction of the conversation. He inquired about the woman's continued employment status. The Bureau responded with a resounding affirmation, emphasizing the necessity of her dismissal. 2 weeks later, a disgruntled Tracy Washington found herself in charge of the firm's small office in Paducah, Kentucky. The ongoing media attention had led to her being perceived as unemployable elsewhere, while she was financially disadvantaged in the divorce, with no family or social life to speak of. Her job was the only thing she had left. Vic was taken by surprise to find a note from George Buell placed prominently on his office desk when he arrived at work. On a Monday morning, the envelope was securely sealed, prompting Vic to wonder about its sender until he opened and read its contents. The note contained a rather unconventional invitation, if one could even classify a summons from Buell as such. It proposed a meeting with the mafia boss in his office for lunch that very day at noon with only the two of them present, as stated in the note. Despite having never encountered Bureau in person, he was aware, like many others, of the rumored association between Buell and the demise of the man involved with his unfaithful partner. Pondering the reason behind the summons, he was certain he could not afford to disregard it. Following a thorough pat-down, he was guided into Bureau's office by a towering figure who seemed to be having the day was challenging. He was directed to a table on the side, which was already adorned with what appeared to be a lavish Italian lunch. Buell introduced himself, shook Vic's hand, and escorted him into a seat. It was just the two of them in the office, which underwent bug sweeps daily, allowing for open communication. Bureau apologized, remarking, "I owe you an apology of sorts. As you are likely aware, I am the one who altered the course of your life. A significant misstep, if I may be so bold. You were never intended to be affected. In fact, I was unaware of your identity or that of your wife." "If I may interject, Mr. Bureau," Victor said, his expression bright and cheerful, "I believe there is no need for apologies on your part. In fact, you did me a great favor." 1 year. Old Bourbon Buell had been poured and the man smiled once more. "That is truly amazing," Victor remarked. His superior stared at him intently, anticipating an explanation. "Yes, I apologize. As I was saying, I was not aware that my unfaithful wife was cheating on me. You not only informed me of this, but you also took action. You had her lover taken care of, and the way you did so was impressive." The revocation of masculinity was a noteworthy element of the narrative. It is hoped that the associate provided a brief interlude before administering the final shot. The 4.5-month incarceration was a relatively minor consequence for the demise of the character in question. Therefore, gratitude is extended for this action. If the protagonist is at peace with this outcome, then the guilt experienced by the narrator will dissipate. Cheers. The two men nodded at each other, took a sip of their drinks, and returned their glasses to the table.